trying to think what he sounds like.
Wait, what do you mean, what does he sound like?
Well, I just hear like this really squeaky noise. I actually.
And he goes, woo, and he gets real excited.
That's basically it, yeah.
Well, hello there, FC Dallas Curious fan, and welcome to another episode of Third Degree, the podcast. I believe this is number 31. Is that right? I think
that sounds right to me.
Yeah, I think so, yes. Well, hello, my name is Peter, and I am joined by my two very good friends, all the way from somewhere nearby. It is Dan Crooke. Hello, Dan.
Hello. I'm calling in from somewhere nearby. That was very generic.
That was extremely generic. And, of course, our hero and leader from the thirddegree.net website thing, the founder and co-editor, and also from the Dallas Morning News, Buzz Carrick. Come in, Buzz.
Hello, Peter, calling in today from Atlanta, where I'm getting ready to participate in the mass fan walkout.
Why are they walking out in Atlanta?
I don't know. Apparently, there's some group of their fans who find that their current form is well below the usual standards of Atlanta United excellence, and the only response is a mass walkout.
You know, it really took an amazing feat to have overcome and taken first place on the annoying fan scale over Seattle in that short amount of time. That's unbelievable. Okay, guys, we have so much to discuss today, but I want to start off by diving headfirst right into the disappointing donuts of last Saturday as Real Salt Lake comes to town. What a snoozer of a game that was. Oh, that was not a good soccer spectacle at all. But the one thing that I took away from the game was this question. Why aren't we talking about the loss of Carlos Gruezo more? Because that clearly is really impacting this team, ironically, in the attack more so than in the defense.
Yeah, I think that was the first game where it was fundamentally clear that there was a massive problem in the midfield. The previous couple of games, to be fair, I thought Brandon Cervania had a good run, and I thought Brian Acosta had done fairly well, if not great. They'd been okay. You know, they'd won in Sporting. You know, that was a decent showing. So, but this game, the RSL midfield controlled the game. Particularly Brandon Cervania had a poor game, and that really is the Gruezo spot where he's missing. And I think we've all underestimated the loss that he's going to be over the course of this season. And they're going to have to figure out, well, no, you haven't. I mean, it's a collective fan base. I mean, all, the amount of money that got paid for him and the amount of money he was getting paid when he was here should certainly tell you what his value was. And I think it's obviously pretty clear at this point that that game was a big miss without him in there. And they're going to have to try and figure out something that's clear. That wasn't very good.
Yeah, Dan, I'm going to ask you for your reaction to the article Buzz wrote from the practice observations. What was your reaction when you saw that Luchi says that they're trying to make Brian Acosta the 6 on this team?
Bollocks. That was my actual reaction.
Is that an actual recording of the moment when you read it?
Yes, it may well be through the magic of Peter Welton's editing. That was my recorded reaction.
Yeah. That really, Buzz, that completely caught me off guard. It answers a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But man, it really blew a fuse in my head that they now suddenly consider him to be the Gruezo replacement as a 6.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised for him to say that. He talked about analytics a little bit when he said that. The profiles, quote unquote, that they like to use. But with the eyeball test, I watch Acosta play when he plays as a 6, and I really don't like it. I think he often, as a 6, drifts out of position, whether he drifts too deep or too high or too wide. And the games where he's been playing as a 6, almost always there are goals scored from that position, that right at the top of the box, which is where he should be. So that really bugs me, actually, that they think that. I agree with the rest of his analysis in terms of where his players all fit. Cirillo is the hard 6, the guy that could do that job. Cervania for me is an 8. We like Paxton can 10, but we like him as that 8 sort of combo player that he's been doing, so how they I don't know. I don't get the Acosta as a 6. I don't like that at all. If you don't think Cerrillo's ready to be the 6, then you got to do something, I think. Whether that he also didn't seem to be super strongly indicating that was the position that they were still looking at in terms of this window. When he talked about the window, he talked about Francis Tuahene being the default if they can't get somebody, not Cerrillo or Hayes or whatever else. So I'm a little mystified by the whole thing.
Tuahene playing as a center midfielder?
No. When I was asking him about, is your roster set? Are you going to go get somebody? And he said, "Oh, we're looking at one or two things, but that don't happen. We're going to bring back Francis." Not no discussion at all of we really need a 6. I mean, none of that was in there. So clearly they don't think it's a problem. Clearly they think Acosta's the guy. I don't, but I'm not the coach. So what can we do at this point?
Yeah, the whole time that we finally realized that Gruezo was on his way out the door, and while I get it, look, they were offered an insane amount of money for his services, and at the end of the day, they probably did the right thing. But to this day, I'm still mystified why it seems like the fan base is far more freaked out over the loan of Aranguiz back to a club in Chile. Versus Brian Gruezo, or Carlos Gruezo, who to me was clearly the best player on the team. Yes, I mean that even over Paxton. And his loss was going to end up screwing things up because they didn't have anybody else that could play the holding mid by himself, and they still don't. And if you pull Acosta back as a 6, Cervania still has to come back and help him out, which is, in my mind, when I watch this team, is the clear difference in why they've struggled even more in attack than they were when Gruezo was even here.
Yeah, we've talked about before that they play better, and Luchi wants a single 6. They don't want he prefers not the double pivot, but the single. And the only guy they have that could do that is Cerrillo. I mean, possibly Jota can if they sign him and come up, but he's not ready for MLS level yet. Cerrillo had made a good run for a couple of games, and maybe that's part of why they felt comfortable selling Gruezo, was because they thought that Cerrillo had done a really job and was ready, but then he went to the U20s and stagnated, and now he's trying to work his way back and is not quite there again. But that may be the long-term. I'm sure that's the long-term solution at this point, is that they think Cerrillo is going to be the guy going forward at some point. It's just going to be, look, we talked about it, developmental team now, right? This is what you're going to have to deal with. The rest of this season is going to be, this is Luchi's first season. He's figuring out who he wants to keep and who he doesn't. They're going to probably end up with Cerrillo in there as the guy long term. So we'll see what happens. I mean, he did mention, when I talked to him this week, he did mention that if they get to this winter and they still feel like 6 is a problem, then maybe they'll go do something about it.
This is it's weird, even in any sense. You've just sold a defensive midfielder for $4.5 million, which, this level of team and in this league and that position, great amount of money. You're trying to shoehorn a $4 million 8 into that position. That just doesn't make sense in the business sense. Doesn't make sense in the footballing sense. It's just outright bizarre.
Yeah, there's so many aspects about the irony of all this is that Gruezo's departure hasn't seemingly affected the team defensively in a bad way. They're still playing that part of the game very well. They're super stingy. They don't give up a ton of goals, and I very rarely do I watch this team of late and go, good Lord, they're just getting absolutely hammered in their own half of the field. All the problems are in the other half of the field, and that to me is the real frustrating part, was that at least with Gruezo, it gave them an extra body to push forward. And now every time I look at the field, there's just way too many center midfielders playing in their own half of the field and not making too many strides in advancing the ball. And for a team that already had a ton of problems in attack, it just seems to have gotten worse with the ironic loss of a defensive midfielder.
Well, you say, players back in their own half. This past game, you had Jesus and Paxton side by side in their own half. Granted, Paxton was sort of brought in as that more of an 8 role, but it just I was just watching the game, just thinking this is crazy. Like, you wouldn't think this is a home performance by a team who has a fantastic home record against a Real Salt Lake side that really aren't that good.
Yeah, Buzz, that was the most interesting. You and I actually traded. We weren't sitting with each other at the game. We were in different places, and you and I texted back and forth. That was the most mind-boggling substitution in that scenario I could have possibly come up with. The idea that he took Cervania off and put Paxton on just seemed to be really a weird answer to to the game's question.
Yeah, Luchi. When I talked to him about it a little bit, he mentioned that Cervania wasn't, as Luchi put it, finding the ball. That he wasn't digging it out enough and getting enough time on it, and it just was allowing too much play. And my only thought process was that Paxton is a high energy player who does aggressively play defense and does pinch and does get turnovers and does win the ball back. Even if he's playing high, he does that. But when he's playing low, he does it too. So, I don't know what his other options really would have been at that time. Was Ja'Cory Hayes on the bench? Ja'Cory was on the bench. That might have been a more 1-for-1 kind of sub, but
man, I didn't watch that game, Buzz.
Ja'Cory was on the bench.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I wasn't as I was sitting there watching the game. Brandon Cervania did not scream out to me as the problem with this team, and it seemed very clear to me that the players that needed to be changed out were a Jesus, a Badji, a Mascara, and where you take any one of those three out, move some other people around, let Pax play the 10, and suddenly things feel like maybe things would gotten better. I was just really surprised by Luchi's thought process.
Yeah, that was the weirdness of it, is I think all of us were sitting there thinking, oh, this is where we're going to see Paxton come on as sort of that his typical player underneath where Jesus had been playing. If you don't want to bring Jesus out, put him somewhere else and bring somebody else out or whatever. That's what we expected him to be, to provide a spark, to provide that high press, to provide the role he always has. And they didn't do that. And so like you're now playing with like a completely different system than you're used to playing, and a completely separate set of players than you're used to playing. I guess it underscores how much Luchi values Jesus Ferreira as that underneath role. I agreed with you. I was definitely scratching my head, and I still don't quite understand it, but I mean, it is what they did. And when you go back and you look at it, you can see that, Brandon was not getting enough of the ball, but I like you watched the game, and that was not what I had targeted as the problem at that point.
Yeah, it was a weird performance all the way around, highlighted by what I am 99% sure has to be one of the most frustrating performances of a player in a Dallas shirt in the 20 some odd years I've been watching this club. Dominic Badji on Saturday night was terrible. And highlighted by two moments in particular. One was the shot, and I keep asking somebody to generate this value for me because I don't know how it's done, but the XG value of this particular shot had to have been almost a square up 1, and he put it out for a throw in. I couldn't believe what I was watching in that moment. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
I remember the play you're talking about. Yes. I certainly didn't think Badji was good. My biggest complaint, watching him play is that there's, particularly of late for some reason, there's a big disconnect between him and Barrios. Barrios had about 10 balls from right outside the right edge of the penalty box that he's firing in for somebody to find. And how you have a 9 who doesn't find any of them is beyond me.
Yeah.
The one game in Kansas City where he had, I think it was Kansas City game, where he had that moment of like real anger and real like the word Luchi used was conviction to get to the ball, and he scored. And it's like that was the word that Luchi used after the RSL game was we lacked conviction in the final third. We just don't have the wherewithal or the desire or whatever it is to get to the ball first. And for me, that was one of the things I tweeted early was that RSL was beating Dallas to all the little things, all the little balls, all the little free ones. They were getting there that split second earlier. They wanted it a split second more. And at home, that's inexcusable. At home, that cannot happen.
Oh, yeah. And the heat and everything. Yeah.
And the heat, yeah. When the other team from up where it's a little bit cooler, admittedly, right? Salt Lake, it should be cooler. They should not be used to this heat. You should crush them, and they should wilt on your home field with your energy because you're used to it. You should be fitter. You should be wanting it more at home, and that wasn't happening. And right from the first 30 minutes, I thought, boy, this is a really bad sign, and that's exactly how the game worked out.
Yeah, Dan, do you have any particular Badji moments you'd like to discuss from Saturday's game?
No, I think the most positive thing you can say is that one where Barrios got in from the byline on the left-hand side, and Badji managed to get ahead on a ball that he really shouldn't have been able to get to, but Justin Glad was able to outmuscle him in the jump. That was honestly his high point of the game, putting a shot high over the bar.
Yeah, but I think if it's the same one I'm thinking of, he hit the ball with the back of his head.
Yeah, still a header though, right? I mean, he had no right to get to it. Just getting to it was it was good and impressive.
Yeah,
that was as good as his game got.
The evening ended. I was already done with him at one point, but I will only throw out one more moment that I actually heard other people audibly gasp when it happened, which was after Edwin Jossi came on. Dallas won a ball in their own half. A counter was on.
Oh, Jesus.
Badji had the ball, and Edwin is making a straight vertical run, and there is a slicing through ball to be played that is about as 101 soccer as it could have been. And what does Badji do? He holds up play. He literally put his foot on the ball and stopped it and brought it back around the other direction. And I thought Jossi was going to kill somebody. And that was pretty much the end of the evening, and hopefully for Badji for some time. And I just don't understand what goes through that guy's head every once in a while. The original Dallas Burn fan, Dustin Christman, who now lives up in Colorado, reminded me that when the trade happened and Badji came here, Rapids fans said, look, this is what you're going to get. A guy that you give any time to think about it is always going to screw it up. He will only score goals when he has no time to think about it. And I'm pretty sure Dustin's right. If you go back and look at all the goals he has scored for FCD, almost I'd be willing to bet 99% of them is this one-touch scramble in the box kind of thing within 6 to 8 yards.
Yeah, I would imagine that's true. And that's what I talked about with him when I said he's at his best when he plays really angry. And he's not sitting back. He's not on his heels. He's not thinking about it. He's just aggressive and going and knifing. That's his best stuff. And most of the time he doesn't play that way. And, if you could get him to play the other way all the time, he probably would have somewhere between 10 and 15 goals. And because he doesn't, because he is on the back heel and responsive instead of active, that's the difference for him.
Yeah, when we think about the problems at the number 9 position with this club, there have been moments this season where I've thought, maybe this has more to do with the players behind them and not getting the service into those guys, between Andresnik and Ferreira and Badji. And then suddenly I see a performance like that and I begin to think, no, yeah. I do think it also is the lack of talent in that position for this club. And frankly, as good as Jesus has been, I'm not 100% sure he's even proving himself out to be the answer.
No, I agree with that, and I think that's part of why they're trying him in other positions. As much as we like him, and as talented as he looks at such a young age, he's not so far turning into like this 100% pure goal poacher that you would hope that he could possibly be. And when you have a guy like Pepe coming behind him, who admittedly is still a season or two away, you got to think long term, like what are we going to do with this kid if he's not the answer at the 9 spot?
Dan, the other thing that has been highlighted this week through multiple media outlets and the club itself is, and something I don't think, in retrospect, now that I've read all this, that we've ever given credit for, is the turnaround in Jesse Gonzalez's game and the improvements he's made this season.
Yeah, I remember somebody tweeted last week or the week before, actually requesting us to talk about Jesse a little bit because, without the issue of his passing, without the issue of his decision making, we just hadn't mentioned him. It's, goalkeeper's one of those positions unless you're getting absolutely destroyed, like at the weekend, you don't go out of your way to say, wow, the keeper had a great game. I sort of, for the little roster rankings we do, I'd looked up some passing stats. We missed doing it again last week, but it'll be this week. Honest,
Slacker.
Fired.
Yeah, there was some traveling and stuff, and then
That's all good.
Excuses.
John Leonard got his stuff in late, and but I think Jesse, he'd hit 100% passing against in the game against Toronto in the last of all the last 6 games. I'm not going to count last game because I don't know the number, but 5 of them he was over 90%. I mean, that is such a turnaround from last year when we were talking about 45%, 40%, and then just making boneheaded decisions. The worst thing he did in that game was that weak punch, and then to make a great reaction save on his hip.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, he even is
really
recognizing that though now.
out.
So at least post game, he's saying, "I should have done better with that. I got to get better with that." So I mean, recognition is half the battle, right?
And the time wasting feels like he's at the very least with the time wasting thing, he's gotten smarter and less clearly obvious about it.
For sure. He still gets a card on reputation for that, but he's definitely getting better about it.
It's certainly less annoying than it had been in
Yes.
previous months, right? It's like you don't want to
sure.
roll your eyes and yell at him from the stands. The other thing that we probably don't give enough credit to and due to is the pairing of Matt Hedges and Rito Ziegler. There's just some really, really good work being done between those guys. And it's funny because in watching the very few minutes that I did of the MLS All-Star game and seeing Zimmerman and Hedges together, as much as I thought that pairing could have been great over a long period of time, Ziegler and Hedges is really, really good stuff.
Yeah, they complement each other pretty well. If you could say something of the Zimmerman-Hedges combo, it might have been that they were too similar. Whereas with Ziegler and Hedges, you have players that are a little bit different. Hedges is more aggressive physically. He's more of a pounder. A little bit, I think probably a more rangy kind of athletic defender than Ziegler, who's a little more statutory, but reads the game a little better, is probably, at least before this year, was a better passer and is a more experienced, more clinical kind of defender. So there's a good combo there of guys that are playing well with each other. And when you include Hedges, big improvement in his passing out of the back, that pairing is terrific.
Definitely. You talk about, them being Hedges and Zimmerman being quite similar. It was kind of like just Zimmerman was the extreme. He was a freak athlete, but you knew there was going to be a brain fart in every game. Whereas, Ziegler is the intelligent footballer who, just provides that calming influence, which you really need in such a young team.
I think we all would agree that the thing that's keeping, because I get asked this question all the time, is why isn't Matt getting national team call-ups? And the majority of the reason behind that isn't it because he just isn't enough of a communicator for that level? Like, they really need somebody to be vocal. And I thought that was, very clear that they asked Zimmerman to do that goofy, stupid, mic'd up thing last night, and they didn't ask Matt to do it.
Yeah, I don't know if that's what keep Hedges out of the national team or not. It's hard to really know. He had a good run, like for a year and a half there where he was getting looks, and it just didn't go anywhere. My gut instinct is that when the ball comes into his feet, it's just a split second too slow for the international level. You could probably get away with him at CONCACAF stuff, but when you get to play Mexico and then when you get into the World Cup type scenarios, that probably is what the thing is going to let him down. He definitely is not a demonstrative talker. If you interview him or even if you're just chatting with him unofficially, he's not super eloquent, not super talkative. Of that pairing, I think Ziegler does far more talking than Hedges does, and certainly Zimmerman is way more chatty than Hedges is. So I don't think that lack of chattiness keeps him out of the national team. I think it's more of the perception that his feet are just maybe not quite, just a split little bit, not quite good enough for the big international level.
Well, I'll let you know that I have heard on more than one occasion the comment about his lack of communication skills on the field is an element to why he's fallen off the charts a little bit. I don't know if it's the reason, but I certainly think it's a lack in a thing that he's lacking in his game that people have taken note of, and maybe potentially hold against him. So for the team, again, we talked about this a second ago. Defensively, the fans can feel really good about it, but going forward is clearly the problem, which leads us into really the topic of du jour, which is the transfer window. And I noticed this week on social media the number of fans who are going back and finding the tweets, finding the video, finding the Facebook posts, finding the whatever of Dan Hunt coming out and actively telling people, hey, we're going to be super active in this window and we're going to get impact players, recalling that and pointing it out, going, hey, what's going on? When really they've done pretty much very little inbound business with the exception of the left foot of Edwin Jassi.
Yeah, that's. I think people picked up on that right away when he said it, and then as the window has gone on, they kept waiting, and they've been asking me, they've been asking you, they've been asking us. Is a player coming? And we've been saying, no, we don't think so. This looks like it's pretty much it. So people, I think, it's important to understand if you're going to try and follow this team that Dan Hunt is almost always going to be overselling the team. He's going to say things on a more grandiose level. He's going to overestimate what's going to happen. And in one sense, the team has been fairly active with Gruezo going out and now Arangi's going out and Jassi coming in. That is 3. Now it's not, 3 moves. It's not 3 in or 2 or 3 in. If you want to include Pepe, that's 2 in. That's certainly not the impact that he seemed to be indicating should happen. But I put up a thing today when I talked to Luchi about they're still looking at 1 or 2 options and they're trying to get one done by next Wednesday when the window closes. I'm not super optimistic that's going to happen.
Yeah, anything that is framed with the double qualifier of potential idea,
yeah,
that generally means no.
Well, he is also correct that it's now late in the window, and if you get somebody in, by the time you get their P1 visa, how fit are they? I mean, you're talking about maybe 5 or 6 games you're going to have them for. So unless they're just a knock your socks off superstar signing, the idea that someone's going to come in now and make an impact is, that's just not FC Dallas. We know that. We know they're not going to spend that kind of money. So this is the team you're going to have for the rest of the window. Hopefully, Edwin Jassi can be impactful, even if it's just giving Barrios a game or 2 off. If it's just pushing Santiago Mosquera to a higher level, that alone will be worth something.
Yeah, in the very limited amount of time, Dan, I don't know what your thought is. I don't have a very good feeling about Jassi. He looked like he winded out in about 10 minutes on Saturday. He didn't like the heat, and I'm still really worried about the fact that you could saw off his right leg and he'd be the exact same guy.
I can definitely, the heat is definitely an adjustment. Yeah, incredibly left-footed. They've really got to find a place for him. If they are going to put him in a lineup, and whether it's off the bench or from the start, it's they obviously saw something they like. He's quick. He has some intelligence about him. If he played that ball to a player with 3 brain cells that he played to Badji, you're at least seeing Ramondo make a save at worst, maybe force a corner, maybe even it goes in. Who knows? I definitely saw in the friendly he played, him pointing out to Reynolds which runs to make. When the ball was out of their zone, let's crowd the midfield, kind of make Sevilla feel a little uncomfortable. He has something about him. He just a right foot isn't part of that.
Yeah. Ryan asked, why wouldn't the team go after a guy like Christian Ramirez if LAFC is looking to dump salary? He also includes a question there about going out and getting somebody like Bobby Wood from Germany. But I do want to ask, because Bobby Wood's obviously out of season, and maybe that relates to how quickly would it take him to wind up. Why do you think the team isn't more active in trying to trade from within the league so they can get an impact player who's already up to speed, at least in terms of fitness?
Well, I think that they have tried to do that. Luchi has said some stuff to me about, they are looking around in the league. My instinct on that, on why Dallas has trouble with that, is because the things they have that are valuable are the kids, and that's their bread and butter now. So if you want a guy that has value, let's say the one I've talked about, let's say Dom Dwyer. Let's say you think that Orlando's not that great. Let's see if we can get that guy.
You have a man crush on Dom Dwyer, don't you?
No, I just think that he would fit the way Dallas plays really well. I think that he would be a great 9 for FC Dallas. But and $1 million is not crazy money for a guy that has a scoring record like he has. But let's say you want to get him, and if you're going to have a conversation with Orlando, with Muzi, if they're going to look at your team and say, well, what do you have that we could use? They're not going to look, the players you don't like are the ones that they don't like. They don't like Badji, right? They're not going to look at Mascara and go, that's the answer. They're going to want Paxton, right? Or they're going to want Brandon Cervania, or they're going to want Cerrillo. So those are the guys, that's the future for this club. So they're not going to give up money.
But hold on, wait a second. I see teams trading GAM for TAM, and this team has an Olympic-sized swimming pool of both of those things. Why aren't they trading for GAM and TAM stuff?
Well, they use a lot of TAM and GAM. They use a lot of it to buy down because they sign a lot of players that are just over the DP level. So they use a lot of it. Like last season, they had 7 DP players at one point, and then they're not $2 million DPs. They're $550,000 DPs. But
and I have hair on my head, not a lot of it, but I've got hair on my head.
I know, but technically, you got to buy those down. Every one of those guys is $100,000, and it's like all the guys that are all the homegrowns that are on the bottom 10 roster spots. Every single one of those guys that makes more than $50,000 or whatever it is, you have to buy that guy down. You can't put him down there with the numbers they're paying him. So they do have a lot of money. That's true. We don't know exactly how much, but they do use a lot of it to squeeze a lot of guys into this roster. So I 100% think that they should do more of that. But then the other side of the coin is, and I'd say this without going and looking up what these guys are getting paid. The Hunts don't pay anybody over $1 million that we've seen. So if a guy's getting paid near $1 million or over $1 million, that's not going to come here. That's not going to be something they're interested in. So I don't know what those guys are getting that you're talking about. I know Dom's because I looked him up. He's right about $1 million, but that's where their salary structure is. So that's the answer to that question: is the Hunts are still going to hunt. They're not going to pay those crazy money.
Do you think that is an actual line in the sand with Clark? Is we're just simply not going to play? We're simply never going to pay a player more than $999,000 a year.
I don't know if it's a hard line, but I would bet, without having the salary information back when it happened, I bet you Danielson made $1 million, and I bet you that they have never been so badly burned by a player in their life. So I would, and I probably Julio Divino got close. That one we might even be able to look up, but I just feel like they've probably been burned. A couple times they tried to go that high, they've just gotten really burned. So they're just super, super reluctant to do that. They don't want to spend a lot of money. That's not how it's the Chiefs model, right? It's run a tight budgeted ship for 30, 40 years. And all of a sudden your franchise is worth $2 billion or whatever. So it's just not what they do.
Dan, am I reading too much into Luchi's now clear use of the self-label of this team as a development club?
Wow, this is just getting really depressing. No. No.
I don't mean it to be depressing. It's an honest question. Like, I used to hear Buzz say Luchi calls this a developmental club, and I thought, okay, I don't really understand that context. And then I actually heard him use it in context in the press conference after the draw against Real Salt Lake, and it suddenly dawned on me what he is doing is he's using that as a crutch to communicate to the fans and media, hey guys, I'm doing the best I can with what I got. We're a developmental club. We're not LAFC.
I mean, it's a nice way of saying FC Dallas isn't a team that's challenging, that isn't actively going out and trying to win MLS Cup, but if a cup happened to fall into their laps, that would also be really nice. It's the harsh reality for FC Dallas fans, and in every other country where there's things like promotion and relegation, 99% of fans have to deal with they aren't fans of a challenger. In MLS, where nearly half the league gets in the playoffs, and actually more than half the league gets in the playoffs. And really anyone can win it. That's not something that fans are firstly accustomed to, or secondly should be. It's that harsh reality no one wants.
Yeah, Buzz, I want to make sure that I'm being fair here. Am I misinterpreting Luchi's use of developmental club? Does he mean that as a self-compliment?
I don't know if he means it as a compliment as much as he means it as a description. He means that this is a club where they're going to teach people. He means they're going to buy low and they're going to play them over 3 or 4 seasons and develop them, and they're going to sell them high. That's the idea. The idea is that we're not going to go buy talent. We're going to make talent. We're going to create talent. We're going to create players. So that's what he means. He means that, and that's exactly what it impacts the window, is they're not going to buy these multi-million-dollar players. They're not going to buy a $15 million winger. They're not going to buy Zlatan. They're going to buy guys they think they can turn around and flip for a profit, whether it be inside North Texas itself, whether it be from get a guy from North Texas, bring him up to the first team, and then maybe in a season or two sell him, whether it's an academy guy. It's just what it is. This is a team now that's going to try and create talent and not buy talent.
So, and again, this is going to get into the whole issue of what is the draw for a reason why anybody would spend any money to come to Bay for season tickets, which is, it's very likely we are now going to end up with an MLS Cup winner, which is a club that has been here in the league for just a very, very short amount of time on the heels of another club that literally just showed up and joined the party.
Yeah, this is an era now where the couple of new MLS players, whether they be 2 seasons new or whether you go back to Portland or Seattle or whatever, these clubs that are willing to spend a whole lot more money, they're going to have a whole lot more talent, and they're going to come in, and that's the new MLS, and the Hunts aren't playing that game. The Hunts are playing the game of, we're going to, instead of buying that much talent, we're going to develop that much talent. Now, the kicker is, when you develop that talent, you have to keep them. You have to pay them. You can't let them leave, or your whole system is bust. I mean, we joke about the Ajax thing, right? Well, the difference between FC Dallas and Ajax is Ajax keeps those guys until they're like 24, 25, and they win titles with them. And then they sell them for $80 million. They don't sell them when they probably sell 1 or 2, but they don't sell most of them when they're 18. They sell most of them when they're in their low 20s. So, that's going to be the real trick for the Hunts and for this franchise, is if you're selling everybody when they're 18, no one's going to buy into the idea here, and you're never going to develop a fan base.
Yeah. The last original founding club to win MLS Cup was the Galaxy in 2014. Now, Kansas City did win it the year before that, but I'm not sure that's the same thing, since that thing went under a tremendous ownership change and branding and rebranding. Prior to the Galaxy, the only other team that did it before that as an original founding team was obviously the 2010 season when Colorado beat Dallas up in Toronto. So it is certainly changing. And it, you bring up a really good point, Buzz, about if you're going to do this and grow young talent, you got to keep it, which now leads us to this whole question about Paxton Pomykal.
Yeah.
And seeing him last night was great, and in the All-Star stuff, the highlights of that, and I'm really happy for him. Somebody asked on Twitter, and I got to find it, and I know you guys have kind of talked about this. Where was that question in here? I think it was John that actually asked the question. If you were to write down a number and slide it across the table to Paxton in December to sign a new deal, what would that number be?
Yeah, I would open around 500,000, I think.
Cheap bastard.
I know you're going to say that, but you can't, as a club, you can't break your salary structure. You're talking about a kid who at this point has played, it's now up to 15 games, I think. I haven't looked today, but as good as he looks, and as much as we like him,
that pass he made when he got in the game, that slicing pass was so awesome.
Right. Well, let me get back to that in a minute. I would start at 500,000, and I would say to him, we're going to give you a 2-year deal with a 3rd-year option, and each year we're going to start at 500. Next year it's at 600, and then the 3rd year, if we pick it up, will be a big bump. That one will probably needs to be up like just short of $1 million. So you're talking about making a 19-year-old kid a DP player, right? Not even a young DP. That's full blown DP territory. That's more money. That's getting into the territory of what Brian Acosta gets, who's played in the World Cup. In the 3rd year, that's Rito Ziegler two World Cups numbers. Paxton's 19. Now I know that we're super excited about his talent level, and I know we're super excited about the future, and I know that they're already making him the face of the franchise. But I think that that's a reasonable number. Now the other side of that coin, which is what you've said before, is that he's your homegrown guy. He's your sale. You're making him the face of the franchise. He's worth a lot more than that. And that may be fair, which leads me to the question that I'm going to ask back in return, is that we always talk about how we want FC Dallas to make this big splash. We want the Chicharito. We want how come they don't sign the Zlatan, or how come they don't buy these $1 million players? Why is it that when we have a young American who breaks out of the U20 team, who we now think is going to become a big key for the Olympic team and the big national team, why isn't that this club's Zlatan? Why isn't that guy this club's big, huge $1 million signing? I mean, you think he's worth 10 million.
All right, hold on.
Let me finish.
All right.
Right. So the question, of course, is that we want Paxton to go to Europe to succeed. But we keep also talking about, let's make him the face of the franchise, right? So let's keep him and let's pay him what he's worth. And so for me to start at 20 years old, I start at 500,000. So
Dan, what's your number?
Okay, my number is going to correlate with marketing 9 times out of 10, right? If you face your franchise, the guy you market, that's the guy that your ticket sales hinge on. Well, FC does have a habit of not marketing, which kind of lowers that, but I mean they've got to offer that low DP money at least. Personally, I'm going, hey, we want to sign you up for the long term. Here's your 800-900 grand, and low increases from there, and just keep him happy. What FC Dallas do is normally mind-boggling. So I'm gonna guess they probably say, "Hey Paxton, we want to cut your salary by 50 grand."
All right, I'm gonna be serious here, and I'm not kidding when I say this. Okay. They need to offer Paxton a $1 million a year contract, and they need to promote the living shit out of it. And why is that? One, it would garner all sorts of media attention that a local native Dallas player who is an attacking force and kind of a unicorn in his position suddenly went from being a kid from, I don't know, Flower Mound or wherever he's from, to making $1 million a year. And he's the club's first $1 million player.
He's from Highland Park. That makes him the poorest person from Highland Park.
He's not from Highland
Park.
Sorry,
Highland Village. Village.
There's a significant difference, Dan, between
that
Highland
still
Park
makes him poor for Highland Village.
All right. Let me get through this. $1 million. All right. He's making $1 million. And the other part of that is the trickle down effect that has on all the other kids that want to become soccer players in this area. Holy crap, look at it. A kid from our neighborhood, our neck of the woods, worked his way up the chain, and now he's the most highest paid player on our local MLS team. And you go out and you make a media noise about signing him to $1 million a year deal. I think that gets attention, and it also, to Buzz's point, does exactly what we really would like for him to be, which is the face of the franchise, our Zlatan, our Carlos Vela, whatever that is, because he has a reason to stay here. He's going to make the big bucks. And I think if you do it for less than $1 million, you lose all the value, all the marketing value that comes out of that as well. Now, will they ever do that? Hell no, they won't do it, but that's what they should do.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent argument, actually. the number that I was throwing out, which was the 500, which is what I think their Hunts are much more likely to do. But I would not be at all upset if they were to give Paxton $1 million. The only downside of that would be, how would Michael Barrios react? How would
you can't?
Well, I would say how would Mascara react? But I don't care what he thinks. So
look, I don't think in this day and age players work that way. And if Paxton is out there producing week in and week out, the amount of money a player is getting, it's not like the Christian Coleman thing, who's making $800,000 and the guy isn't doing anything, or Andresnik, who's making $500,000 a year, and he's literally riding a mechanical bull. I mean, that's what he's bringing social media video to the club. He's not actually doing anything on the field. By the way, I got to say, I don't mean to dogpile on that guy, but when they brought him on in the Real Salt Lake game, it highlighted the one thing about that guy's game that I just don't get. Am I the only one that thinks he's actually scared to win an aerial header ball?
I had not picked up on that, but I'll look for it.
I have never seen a guy of that size and that build work so hard not to win an aerial ball when he's got pressure on him. Now, if there's nobody else around him, he'll go up for a ball. But the minute you put a defender on him, I've seen guys like easily 6 inches shorter than him win headers in the box. I don't watch it next time if we ever see him play on the field again, and I hope we don't.
He's not a terrific athlete, so he doesn't have a great vertical. I will say that. I've seen him get out jumped by guys all the time. So, maybe you're right. Maybe it's intimidation, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that gets intimidated. But it's definitely not vertical.
He had that pretty serious hip injury. He said he's pain free. There's no real repercussion, but where do players normally injure their hips? In headers where they hit the ground hard. I mean, you could see him losing his jump from that. He's white, so obviously he can't jump anyway.
Racist.
Hey, I'm living proof of that. And then there's probably some kind of psychological issue in it. You don't want another 6-month layoff.
No, I don't know. It's the one thing about his game that always surprises me is when I watch him get bodied up by a defender and lose a header ball, and I just can't figure it out. Anyway, the fact that he's absolute crap doesn't surprise me in the least. That part of his game does surprise me quite a bit. I do want to go back to the Dan Hunt part of this, which is we got a question from Alex Arendt, who said, so Dan Hunt totally lied about us strengthening our squad over the summer window. And so I'm going to ask this in a fair way to you guys. Is Dan Hunt lying and just playing that game of ownership, or does Dan actually... Is his understanding of the game and the process and evaluating player quality is just off enough that he may perceive these to be impact players? He just doesn't understand that they're not.
I'm going to go partially the second half of that answer, because you remember that Nielsen was his thing. That was his deal. And the other half of the answer is that he's just super optimistic. He always is thinking that the best stuff is going to happen. I'm going to get these 2 or 3 guys we're targeting. They're all going to come here. They're all going to be great. We're not going to miss on any of them. So it's a combination of, I don't think he's as involved in the situation as you might think. I think that Luchi, Andre, and Marco Ferruzzi are doing most of the bulk of the work these days on that stuff. I think Dan just hears the reports about it. I think he's super, super optimistic and gung-ho. And I think he doesn't quite 100% grasp the talent level of some of these guys he's talking about. So I think it's an oversell, an over-optimism, mostly kind of question.
There's a second part to this, isn't there, Peter?
What do you mean? Like I've got a second question?
Oh, okay. I'm not going to say anything in that case.
Second part. Oh, a second. Yes. Alex did have a second part to his question. Yes. He would. So as a new bit, we're going to do a new bit on the pod. It's Dan Crooke's Library of Impersonations. And so for the debut of Dan Crooke's Library of Impersonations, because you are a noted British impersonator,
People have accused me of that, yes.
Yes, you're very, very popular over in the British Isles. You haven't broken through at our local improv club yet, although we're working on trying to get you booked there on a more regular basis. I thought this would be a great opportunity for you to roll out your impersonations. And Alex, and the beauty of Dan's ability is that he can do this on the fly, like improv them as well. So they're improvisational impersonations, which is really difficult. So for the debut, Alex Aaron asked you to impersonate Dan Hunt lying to the fan base.
Thank you for those complete fabricated statements there. When I said I have been accused of British impersonations, it's people here that think I'm putting on an accent.
I've thought that about you once or twice. So let's hear it. Let's hear your Dan Hunt lying to the fan base impersonation. Live on the podcast.
Okay, he's got a weird voice. Hello, FC Dallas fans. I have purchased an FC Dallas John Deere tractor. It is 74 foot in length, and it transforms into a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I will be on the next season of Monster Jam, coming to you from AT&T Stadium later this year.
That's not terrible.
That's pretty good. Could I get you to chant 3 more points as Dan Hunt, please?
3 more points. 3 more points.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Now, is that the version that he does before an Open Cup game?
The best one was in the playoffs. Oh, actually, the Open Cup final one was pretty special.
Yeah. That's some high irony there. Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll come back to more Dan Crooke impersonations here later in the podcast.
This is the only episode this is ever happening, by the way.
No,
I'm speaking to my agent about this.
I think we have a new bench in the radio
Buzz
business.
Is my agent, by the way.
In the radio business, we call this a benchmark feature, and I think we just found a new one, right, Buzz?
Yeah. Oh, clearly. Yep. Thomas Roberts.
Arno Tussman.
All right. So, anything else about the absolutely frustrating and miserable donuts that the team achieved? Again, another great example of the oddity of this season, which is getting points or missing out on points in games that you absolutely thought FC Dallas should have done the opposite in. Any other thoughts about this game that we should throw out before we move on?
The only one positive that I wrote about that I think was worth talking about is I thought Reggie Cannon was great in that game. He had the verticality that he always has, and he tried to go inside a little bit, a little work with a little combination going forward. That was nice to see. And then, but more specifically, his confidence in the back and his game reading in the back and his anticipation of trying to jump passing lanes and trying to intercept stuff. He had 2 or 3 nice moments where a couple of them he got, a couple of them he didn't, but like since he's come back from the national team, for me, there's been a step forward there. There's been a progression there. And I thought in this game it was on display, and I really liked it. And, we love Reggie anyway, but you love to see a guy continuing to progress and get better. So that's super great to see from a guy who probably is not going to be here very much longer anyway. But, I love it. I thought he was really good.
Yeah. Compliments to another part of the defensive part of the team. All right.
Yes.
Great.
There was one good thing about the RSL game. That was the Special Olympics game after it.
Oh, yes.
Fantastic goal by one of the players making the... it just went viral everywhere, actually.
Yeah.
But it was surprising. There were quite a few people stayed behind to watch that, and it would definitely be great to see more of the crowd stay for things like that, things like the North Texas SC games, and remember that they support an entire club, and that has many facets.
They ended up winning that game 2-0.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Okay, so we had the MLS All-Star game last night. I have to admit, I thought there was an interestingly positive vibe around all of that. The highlights I saw of the skills challenge looked entertaining, and it looked like the players were enjoying themselves. Even the guys from Atletico Madrid, they actually seemed really, really into all of that, and this was really weird and very bizarre, but man, this is fun. So kudos to them for pulling that off. But now Dallas has to all stay down in Orlando. as they face off against the Purple Lions and their Hell Hallway coming up. And I don't know, anybody got any feelings about how that's going to play out, considering that they're going to be missing two of their key components?
Yeah, Acosta is suspended and Reggie Cannon is suspended. My gut instinct is, despite the fact that I think that Brian Reynolds is ready for a game, because he was in Orlando all week, he was not here in Dallas to play with the team and prep with the team. So Brisson took all the reps at right back. And given that he was the answer last time, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case again. That one's pretty obvious. Luchi said yesterday that Ja'Cory Hayes deserves a chance. So it looks like he's going to get Acosta's spot, and then we all assume Paxton will be back playing in his normal transitional spot, which leaves the other position in midfield to either be Brandon Servania or Edwin Surreal. And which one, which he said he hasn't made up his mind yet. And he's actually trying to decide between trying to go with a 6 and 2 forward players, whether it's Paxton and Ja'Cory or whether something else happens. And that means that Jesus Ferreira should be free to perhaps retake the 9 spot, or maybe Barrios and Badji both stepped out of training this week for workload reasons. So maybe they're fresh, maybe they're not. Maybe you might see a Gassi get a start, but otherwise, I think it'd be pretty straightforward. I think off of his performance last game, I don't expect Badji to start. But
I can't imagine Giassi starting a game. He looked like he had about 10 minutes in his tank.
And in training, he's not quite there in terms of the team concept yet. He's not quite clicking it yet, but which means it's going to be Santi, Barrios, and Ferreira up top as the 9, because I don't see Badji starting, as I said. So really, it's just the one question: is Ja'Cory will be in the middle? Who's the other player, Cerrillo or Savania? And then who's the right back? And I'm thinking it's going to be Brisson. Otherwise, it'll be straightforward.
Why wouldn't he do a Servania, Cerrillo, and Paxton midfield? Because isn't that the idea that you've got a true 6, a true 8, and a true 10?
Well, I think what he was saying
or
to
6
me
and
was
2 8s or whatever.
Yeah, they think of Ja'Cory as an 8. So he was saying to me that Ja'Cory has played pretty well, and that there was some hinting there that he's earned a game, and with Acosta out, they sort of like that him for him, and so the question becomes, do I go with the 2 hybrids, which would be Servania and Ja'Cory, or do I go with a straight 6 Edwin Cerrillo, who was captain of the homegrown team? If I saw that correctly, that's a nice honor for him. So you might see Cerrillo as a single 6 and more of a dual 8s with Paxton and Ja'Cory. That may be kind of fun to see that going, because that's the way Luchi wants to play. That's the preferred shape. So some of it'll be in response to the way Orlando sets up. So I think there's a good chance you might see Cerrillo back in there with Ja'Cory.
All right. Let's see. So that game.
We got one small thing.
Yeah, no, we love one small thing. Go ahead, Dan.
Orlando have still never beaten FC Dallas. It's a key thing going into the game, right?
Is that a real stat?
Yeah, I mean they've only played 4 times.
Really? They have never beat them?
Nope. There was the rain delay game down there in Orlando's first season that Dallas won 2-0, won 4-0 on July 4th in the year with the Shield and the Cup. First game in the new stadium, drew 0-0, and then last year they came back up here and Dallas won 2-0.
Yeah, and they don't have a winning record at home either, so it's a good opportunity. This will be one of those games that Dallas goes out and has a nice chance to do some business. So
take that even one step further. Orlando has never scored on Dallas at home.
Whoa,
in Orlando.
That's a good stat.
0 wins, 0 goals by Orlando City in the series history, which is crazy. At Orlando, yeah.
So that
just in general.
Oh, is that in general too? Oh, goodness.
Yeah. The only time they scored was that friendly before the first season when what's his name? Kaká scored the penalty.
Wow.
Yeah. Goodness.
That's
So much for your man crush on Dom Dwyer there, Buzz.
Yeah, well, Dom's not had a great last season or two, but I when I watch him play, I just can't help but think that he would work well with Dallas. That's all.
So, is there any chance that we'll see a Thomas Roberts, a Pepe, or anybody like that, and show up in the 18 or in the game?
I think there's a chance that you'd see Pepe on the bench, perhaps. Johnny Nelson will be with North Texas, I think. Probably so will Callum Montgomery. Although with Brisson playing, you might have to take Montgomery out now that I say that, because if Brisson's going to start, Reynolds will be on the bench. Either Savani or Cerrillo's on the bench. Badji will be on the bench. You might have Cobra again because Coleman will be with North Texas for the last time. And you might see Thomas Roberts, actually. I think that's a viable name.
And by the way, I just saw this when I was looking through the notes. Without looking, can anybody tell me who the second leading goal scorer for Orlando City is this season?
Tesho
Akindele.
Correct. The great Tesho Akindele. Talks amongst yourselves.
Well, he's had, he's an opportunistic player, and they're using him in a way that's, he can finish cleanly if he gets enough service. He's not going to create on his own. I don't think. I think he's a guy that just takes advantage of opportunities when they come. He's probably better at that than Badji is.
He has scored 7 goals in his 18 games for Orlando City, matches the high number of goals he had in an entire season for FC Dallas.
That was his rookie year.
Yeah, his rookie year. He had 7, 5, 6, 4, and then 2, and he already has 7 goals in just under 1,300 minutes. And by the way, he's shooting a lot, too. He has 23 shots on the season, 13 on goal, which already at halfway is essentially as many as he had in most of all the seasons when he was playing for Dallas.
He was also playing as a right winger most of the time in Dallas.
Yeah, true.
Or left wing, sorry.
That game is at 6:30, by the way, boys and girls. 6:30 on Saturday down in Orlando. Yes, it is on 21, although who knows if you can get it or not. You'll probably have to go throw some metal rod on your roof or go to a bar and figure out a place to watch it. I know the club has been trying to promote and share on social media locations that they know that have it, but apparently a lot of these bars use DirecTV as their source or AT&T, and they're all blocked out. So,
well, they're big on Twin Peaks for some reason. Always the supporters groups have their watch parties. El Matador moves around, so they may be in Denton, they may be in Dallas. It'd be worth checking their social media. Dallas Beer Guardians are always at Petticoat Brewing Company down in the Design District.
All right.
There's always options.
By the way, Badji has 28 shots on goal this year. Shots.
Not on goal. They're definitely 15 not on goal.
All right. 15 on goal. That's better than 50%. Surprisingly. 28 shots, 15 on goal.
Buzz, did you get to I have a note here that I'm supposed to give you an opportunity to say something about Paxton. Did you do that?
No, that was it. That was the idea of why can't he be our big $1 million? I mean, if he's worth 10 million or 15 or whatever you think he is, why don't you just keep him? That way you don't have to spend the 15 million and make him your superstar. Why are we as a collective, I don't mean you, me, and Dan, I mean like the world, why are we so fast to say, no, go to Europe. Why don't we say, build the whole thing around this kid for a decade to come?
All right. Well, we answered that question already. Okay, so let's run through some of we asked people, and so let's go ahead and run through some more of these questions. The great Mark Spence asked, how many years are we away from seeing an FCD starting lineup of an all homegrown set of players?
Oh, that's an easily answerable question, actually. It's 100% dependent on center backs, because center back is the position that the FC Dallas Academy has failed to produce talent at.
Other than Chris Richards.
Other than Chris Richards, who's not here.
Right.
So he's not going to play for Dallas. So, and he was produced really by somebody else more than anything. But the answer to that question then is dependent on probably Breck Evans and probably Nico Carrera, who's a 17-year-old kid. Those two guys are probably your best bet to be able to start an MLS game. And so if you look at Nico, you're looking at 3, maybe 4 seasons from now. You'll have enough players to play a complete homegrown 11. So 3, maybe 4 seasons.
All right. Dan Mark's request for an impersonation was for you to do the Knights who say knee.
Knee! Knee!
That's it.
Oh, I love that bit.
Excellent.
I've also got an answer to that question. I don't think it'll happen because if half the homegrowns are worth a damn, they'll be sold off.
They'll just perpetually always just be trying to keep up with the 5 or 6 slots they're using.
It'll be supply and demand.
Supply and demand. The great Rex Darwin has asked the question, are some of our academy or USL players being overlooked by their national teams?
Yeah, I don't think so. There's a fair number of kids in the system who are garnering attention. The problem is that when you get into the youth teams, it's so important, like what year you were born in, because of body development and size. When you talk about national teams, we don't care about that as much in terms of the club, but like in terms of the national team, it makes a big difference. So you have to have the right age at the right time in order to get picked. And if you look at any given age bracket of FC Dallas, there are 5 or 6 players, maybe even 7 players that are getting a camp here, a camp there. They might become a full-time or they might not become a full-time. So I don't think that that's a case of anybody being overlooked. I can't think of anybody off the top of my head. I mean, everyone that I know of that's a real talent has gotten into some national team or the other.
I think last year, one of the coaches told me between the boys and girls academy, I think there were 26 national team call-ups.
Wow.
I mean, I think I've spotted a U.S. scout at an FC Dallas game about every month, maybe every other month. You see one floating around the complex.
What do they look like? Are they easily identifiable?
Well, they're identifiable because they have a clipboard in their hand and because they have a U.S. soccer sweatshirt on or something. And you begin to recognize them over time. You see the same people come back because people have responsibility for certain areas. So you see them return. Like you'll see a guy one week, you might see him watching a 17 game. The next week you might see him watching a 14 game. So it just depends. I know they get scouted. I know that they have conversations with the coaches. It's a lot of times it has to do with nationality too. I mean, the 17s have like 5 kids that have gotten Mexico caps versus U.S. caps, and the Mexico teams, of any teams, are just now starting to really discover the programs in the United States, and they're just now starting to be really, really aggressive about giving call-ups to national team, to FC Dallas players in particular, and FC Dallas actually even goes and has camps in Mexico with their teams just so some of those scouts can see them and play against Mexican teams.
At Araldo G76, he actually brings up a really interesting question that I read about the other day and then adds in something I did not know, which is a previous question about young American national team players not being contacted by the Federation, specifically Ernie Stewart. And then he adds in that he read on Twitter that Stu Holden asked Paxton if he had been contacted by the Federation, and Paxton said no. If I find out that after Ernie Stewart got hired and they still aren't being smart about reaching out and contacting kids with dual nationalities or even kids that aren't dual nationals, my head might explode. How could they possibly be that inept?
Well, they're missing a bunch of youth national team coaches right now. There's 2 or 3 levels that don't have a coach.
Yeah, that's not an acceptable answer.
No, I'm just saying that's why. But you can look at FC Dallas's under 17 team. Both Nico Carrera and Jonathan Gonzalez, who are both pro level talents, eventually they both had Mexico camps and they both had U.S. camps. So, and Nico just did one for both the U.S. and Mexico, and Jonathan just went to Mexico. So, they are working and bringing in the Dallas players. Now, is the U.S. doing a good enough job? Absolutely not. They're not doing a good enough job. There's a whole list of players they've lost to Mexico. They need to do much better than they are. But the whole U.S. system's in disarray right now. We've seen it top to bottom. There's all this news about Tab leaving and being on the outs, and he's supposed to have hired all these coaches that haven't been hired. So there's a whole lot of stuff going wrong, and I'm not surprised that I don't even know who the Olympic team coach is. Does anyone know who the Olympic team coach is?
It's Jason Kreis.
Is it?
I'm 99% sure it's Kreis, yes.
Well, Kreis just took a job with Inter Miami too, so he might have too much going on his plate. So we'll have to see, why they haven't contacted Paxton. I don't know. The first time you would think Paxton would hear from Bearhalter might be the January camp. You want to see Paxton in the January camp. If he doesn't make that camp, then there's a problem.
I think there's history to it as well. Like, we all get this, this idea that players are constantly in contact with the national team coach. And I mean, Jesse was a great example. He filed his one-time switch. And the first time that he actually spoke to Bruce Arena was when he got called up. I mean, I'd asked him a few times in the weeks leading up to, like, are you actually speaking to people at US Soccer? And he's like, I mean, I'm hearing through my agent, but I personally am not speaking to anyone.
I'm trying to see if we had any more questions delivered in. No, I think we've covered them all. The one that we didn't hit, though, was John Leonard, our good friend John Leonard, and the absolute encyclopedia of all things, lower division. We need to get him back on the show, by the way. He was such a hit when we had him on previous time. Is it his impersonation request, Dan, of you for the debut of Dan Crooke's Library of Impersonations was for you to impersonate him? And this might be the high point at this, no pun intended.
No, that's definitely a pun intended there. Right, I need to prepare for this. I need to go find some helium or something. Funny thing with John is he's the total opposite of me. I'm very. People always say you're never going to die of a heart attack. 'Cause you don't get excited about anything. Jokes on them. Fatty foods will do that to you. With John, he gets really excited about the most minuscule thing. He'll watch North Texas SC, and Breck Evans will make a pretty routine clearance, and you'll just hear from the corner of the press box where John's getting really excited, scribbling a note about
That's
it.
Really
like,
good.
hey, okay.
Yeah, I have to admit, the last North Texas game, I had to go sit in the stands. It was too much in the press box.
How is he getting away with all this demonstrative and emotional outburst in the press box? You're not supposed to do that.
It's him and Garrett and Armand are the only ones in there, so they just feed
I'm
off each
normally in
other.
there
It's
too. That was a Friday.
I don't know how you put up with that either, Dan.
Oh, nuts! Oh, that's crazy. That's my favorite new thing in the whole world. Oh.
Yeah, everyone should experience a game with John Leonard at some point.
John is so awesome. I love that kid so much. He is a oddball, but that's what I love about him. He's just so weird in such a perfectly good way, and I mean that. Yes, and I can confirm that Jason Kreis is the Olympic team coach, Buzz, by the way. And
there you go.
That's an exclusive, third-degree exclusive.
Yeah, third degree. Like, just breaking news, Jason Kreis is the coach of the Olympic team.
I didn't know.
Well, and you should be ashamed of that.
Yeah,
you, of all people.
At least I knew he was working for Inter Miami.
I don't think he is.
Wasn't he going to be their head of their, or a big part of their academy, head of their academy, and then coach their USL team that's launching the next year?
I don't think so. I think he's doing the national team full time, and it's certainly. And I'm looking right now online, and it's not listed in his career stuff at this point. Oh wait, current? No, you're right. So there is something in here about him having something to do with the technical department. So maybe he is doing that.
Yeah, it looks like he joined them back in January, so I was right about that. But,
yeah.
So he's double dipping, and he's probably trying to launch all their academy teams because they're joining into the DA this fall. That's got to be like less than a month from now.
A kid.
So he's probably pretty busy.
Yep. That's a club with
signing
some
days
style.
already happened, so he's got to be really busy.
All right. Anything else? Any other selections from Dan Crooke's Library of Impersonations that you'd like to show off tonight?
Was that aimed at me or Buzz?
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking you if you have any you'd like to. You got something you want to show off in terms of an impersonation.
No, I was. It's kind of a funny subject because the first week when you were covering on the ticket, I was really tempted to, just put on a really deep voice and go, "Well, hello there, FC Dallas, curious fan."
Oh, when you were,
but then Buzz got very serious and just did it, and I was like, cool. I went back in my shell.
I thought the podcast was excellent without me. I enjoyed listening to both those episodes.
I enjoy it when you edit it.
Yeah.
And I'm not up until 2 a.m. doing that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dan. Good job this evening, and thank you, Buzz. So glad you're back into the swing of things. I'm sure that was hard to get used and acclimated back to doing that again.
It was.
Yes, I'm sure it was. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious Fan. We will speak to you next week in another edition of Third Degree, the podcast.